Já, þetta dálítið svona erindi þannig að þú bara ræður hvað þú gerir. Ég get líka bara búið þig upp og já, ég held að sé svona einfaldara. Jæja. Góðan daginn, kæru gestir, sendiherrar Noregs. Verið öll hjartanlega velkomin í Þjóðminjasafni Íslands í dag á Þjóðbúningadaginn. Þessi dagsetning engin tilviljun, svo snemma í september, en í fyrra þá heiðruðum við á þessum degi Sigurð málara á 150 ára ártíð hans þann 7. september. Sigurður var einn forystumann stofnun þessa safns og hefur Þjóðminjasafnið ávallt haldið minningu hans á lofti með ýmsum hætti og samofin saga hans og forysta gagnvart þjóðbúningnum skipar þar stóran sess. Þjóðbúningadagurinn sameiginlegt verkefni safnsins og Heimilisiðnaðarfélags Íslands og að þessu sinni fengum við norska sendiráðið með okkur til samstarfs og mun Mette Vårdal, sagnfræðingur, flytja erindi norskar þjóðbúningahefðir og skráningu norska þjóðbúningsins á lista UNESCO. En sá árangur náðist snemma í desember síðastliðnum. Á dagskrá einnig leiðsögn þróun þjóðbúningsins, þar sem farið verður grunnsýningu safnsins hérna uppi á 3. hæð, 2 hæðum ofar. Og við finnum það mjög vel hér í safninu hversu áhugasamir gestir okkar eru búninginn, fatasögu okkar Íslendinga og íslenska þjóðbúninginn. En sú vakning sem hefur orðið í samfélaginu íslenska þjóðbúninga og sögu hans að verða mjög áþreifanleg. Mér langar að segja frekar mjög sýnileg. Námskeiðahald þar sem bæði byrjendur og lengra komnir keppast við að sauma sér búning með miklum blóma og skila sér með ört stækkandi hópi þeirra sem klæðast búningnum. Nú sér maður konur og líka karla klæðast búningi við mun fjölbreyttari tækifæri en áður og þjóðbúningurinn sannarlega farin að ryðja sér til rúms. Við sjáum forsetann okkar, hana Höllu Tómasdóttur, ganga skrefinu lengra og klæðast peysufötum og upplut við opinber tilefni í meira mæli en þjóðhöfðingjar eða önnur fyrirmenni okkar hafa gert á undanförnum áratugum. Já, það sannarlega gaman að sjá þessa þróun og þann sýnileika sem þjóðbúningur okkar að öðlast. En þá auðvitað rétt að hrósa því fólki, ekki síst þeim konum, sem hafa haldið þessari menningu á lofti, unnið af eljusemi við rannsóknir og sauma og grúskað og leitað upp í heimildirnar og haldið við þessari menningararf. Og ég veit að þið eru hér. Ég að horfa framan í ykkur, margar þekki ykkur á nöfnum eða verkefnum eða af því sem maður lærir þegar maður tekur við starfi þjóðminjaverðar, get ég sagt ykkur. Nú vinnum við í Þjóðminjasafninu að stóru verkefni en á næsta ári munum við halda sýningu á íslenska kvenbúningnum og aðalmarkmið okkar til að geta haldið þessa sýningu var að fá að láni frá Victoria and Albert safninu í London íslenska brúðabúninginn sem ég veit að þið hafið öll heyrt og þekkið. Þetta einstakur gripur í sögu okkar, fluttur úr landi af William Jackson Hooker árið 1809 og talinn glataður þar til hann fannst á 7. áratug síðustu aldar. Þjóðminjasafnið hefur fengið sérstakan styrk í þetta verkefni og nú orðið ljóst að V&A-safnið hefur samþykkt lánið að undangengnum miklum bréfaskrifum og skýrsluskilum frá okkur aðstæður og öryggi. Að ári ættum við því að geta virt fyrir okkur Hooker-búninginn hér á Þjóðbúningadaginn. Ég horfi núna á þennan hóp fyrir framan mig og segi nú bara, og búin að fylgjast með ykkur líka þegar komið inn í húsið, inn í safnið, að það ákveðið stolt sem að maður sér, sem að birtist þegar að þú klæðist svona búningi og ég finn það í ykkar og sé það í ykkar andlitum. Og mér langar að þakka ykkur fyrir að skreyta þetta umhverfi svona ríkulega. Og það mér að minnsta kosti mikil hvatning að klára mín peysuföt sem ég hóf að sauma akkurat fyrir ári síðan undir góðri leiðsögn og námskeiði hjá Annríki. Þá var ég stödd í Skagafirðinum á hátíð þar. Hér var önnur hátíð en það vildi nú bara svo skemmtilega til að hér var mikið húllumhæ og verulega góður dagur sem við höfum enn í minnum, tölum hérna starfsfólki hvað var gaman að halda hana dag með Heimilisiðnaðarfélaginu, hvað það tókst vel til. Þannig að það auðvitað þannig að við viljum halda því áfram. Við viljum festa þennan dag í sessi, í samstarfi við heimilisiðnaðarfélag eða sjálfsögðu. Og af því ég fór að tala sjálfa mig í þessum örfáorðum og peysufötin sem eru að verða til, að þá vonast ég til að verða þá gjaldgengd til þess að dansa með þjóðdansafélagi Reykjavíkur sem ætlar að taka hérna sporið á eftir og auðvitað líku dagskránni með dansi. En áður ég lík máli mínu og færi stjórnina yfir til hennar Kristínar Völu Breiðfjörð sem formaður heimilisiðnaðarfélags Íslands, þá langar mig að þakka ykkur fyrir ykkar ötula starf, ákaflega gott samstarf nú sem fyrr og bara hversu vakin og sofandi, vakið ekki sofandi. Það hlaut að verða eitthvað sem maður segir, sko. Ég get sagt ykkur það að ég skrifa texta, það náttúrulega svo að maður fara ekki bara að horfa á fólk og fara að tala bara viðan völl. En að vera vakin og sofin, það alveg til og má segja það, en vera vakin yfir því að þessi menningararfleið glatist ekki. Það auðvitað mjög mikilvægt og það hefur heimilisiðnaðarfélagið gert og margir fleiri, að sjálfsögðu fræðafólk hér við þessa stofnun og víðar. Þannig að við auðvitað vitum það að þráðurinn slitnaði ekki og það mjög mikilvægt að hann slitni ekki áfram og ég vona bara að Þjóðminjasafni geti haldið áfram þessari dagskrá bara með góðu samstarfi ykkar allra. Mér langar að þakka líka norska sendiráðinu, þér, Cecilia Annette Villog, gaman att se och hur väldigt fint du idag. Och ja, du var stanna och vi var klappa. Och ja, mycket glädje att se också dem som har här norsk bunad på och vi får ju lite föreläsning i anledning av dagen. Jag vill lika tacka samstagsfolki mínu sem hafa staðið að dagskrárgerð og undirbúningi dagsins með heimilisiðnaðarfélaginu og öllum þeir sem komu þetta fram sem ég hef nú þegar nefnt til að gera þessa dagskrá sem best úr garði. En gjörsvölu Kristín Vala, hún ætla að segja örfórð.
Já, kæra þakki fyrir Harpa og Þjóðminjasafni vil ég þakka fyrir að hýsa þennan dag og vera með okkur í þessu að gera þennan dag gleðilegan að við erum að fagna hérna þjóðbúningnum okkar og ekki síst þá kannski einmitt konunum sem að eru að baki þjóðbúningnum. Nú ég að horfa hérna inn í salinn og ég að leita hérna ungri stúlku sem með silfur ömmu sinnar. Hvar hún? Ég sé ykkur þarna aftast, maður sjá, þú verður eiginlega að fá að standa upp. Þessa ungu konu hittum við hérna inn í anddyri Þjóðminjasafnsins. Hún með silfur sem að amma hennar fékk, var það ekki afmælisgjöf? 50 ára afmælisgjöf fyrir 50 árum. Hún hefði orðið 100 ára í desember, fékk þetta silfur í afmælisgjöf þegar hún var 50 og núna þetta silfur komið í notkun hjá barnabarninu og bara vel gert til hamingju með hennar fallega búning. Þetta einmitt það sem að Þetta það sem að gerir búninginn svo sérstakann fyrir mér. Það þessi tenging við formæður okkar. Við þær konur sem að koma á undan okkur sem að lögðu mikið á sig til þess að eignast fallegt silfur, fallegar svundur. Þannig að þegar ég klæðist búningnum þá mér alltaf hugsað sérstaklega til hennar langömmu minnar og mér þykir svo skemmtilegt að sjá þegar það verið bæði að nýta gamla búninga og gamalt silfur og sjá að það komi aftur í notkun. En eins og ég segi og Harpa kom inn á og þá þessi viðburður hérna styrktur meðal annars á norska sendiráðinu við þakkum kærlega fyrir styrkin og það að Mette Vårdal skildi geta komið hérna í dag og heimsótt okkur. En við erum að horfa dálítið til Norðmanna. Þetta eru okkar fyrirmyndir í lífinu þegar kemur að búninganótkum. Við viljum verða eins og Norðmenn og nota búningin okkar mikið og oft. Þannig að núna ekki eftir neina að bíða. Ég vil bjóða þá Mette Vårdal bara velkomna hérna upp á svið og segja okkur pínulítið frá norskum búningahefðum. Gjörðu svo vel, Mette.
Thank you so much for inviting me. This is me, and I've never felt prettier before or after. It was my second folk costume or bunad, and it was made to me by my great-grandmother. Bunad is traditional clothes from Norway, but used in a modern way. We make a distinction between folk costume, which is the old-fashioned clothes worn in the 1700s, and the bunad, which is the party wear that we use for special occasions today. They could look almost or exactly the same, the folk costumes and the bunads, but they are used in different ways. And in many ways, the bunad is a kind of Sunday story, sunshine story. I've read that almost 70% of all Norwegians own at least one bunad, and they use them. And last year, as said, the bunad was put on the UNESCO list of cultural heritage. But that was not because everything is great. That's because there are some problems in this story. So I'm not only going to tell you how great it is about the bunads in Norway, I'm also going to tell you about the sort of problems, the things that make us think that we have to do something to protect the tradition. This is a wonderful picture of a community in a place called Telemark. It's in the middle of the southern Norway. And they are all wearing folk costumes. And folk costume, it's nothing that is typical for Norwegian or Iceland or Europe at least. I mean, it's global phenomena. But it is different from the different countries and the different regions. So I said folk costume is a global phenomenon with a local interpretation. Which means when I'm talking about the Norwegian tradition, we have a lot in common, but also something that will be different. So how did we start to use and make folk costumes? In Norway, that happened, well, in the middle of the 1600s, I guess. The Black Death came to Norway in 1349. I've read that you didn't have it in Iceland, lucky you. About half the Norwegian population died. And it took several hundred years to come back to the same height as before the Black Death. Life was very hard, and there were no spare time to do anything else than to protect yourself and get food. But in the middle of the 1600s, things started to become better. People lived longer, they had more food, there were less diseases. It was just a simpler life. And they got more spare time and more time to making things that are nice, just for pleasure. And we started to travel more. That meant we got a lot of influence from all over Europe. We traveled abroad to see what was out there, and people started to travel to Norway. So we got a lot of new ideas about how to make clothes. We had time to make them, but another important thing is that it was not made for one person and by one person alone, because if it was, I would just make costumes for me like I want them. But it was kind of a collective creativity to make costumes. The women, mainly women, sat together. They were weaving together, sewing together. They shared knowledge, patterns, and made these way of making costumes together. And also, the clothes were not owned by one single person. Very often, it belonged to the family or the farm or whatever, and when you had used it for a while, someone else could use it. So it was important that it wasn't made only for me to show my personality like it is today. It should fit the whole community. Therefore, we started to make things that looked alike and that were practical and had the same kind of taste. So that was the beginning of the folk costumes in Norway. It was made and used for every day, for work and for party. And those women, they are wearing the same costume as I am wearing. This is a bunad, this is folk costumes, but they are quite similar. They were used by the rich and by the poor. And they looked almost the same, but I guess you can tell who's the rich and who's the poor woman here. Everyone used them, except the officials like priests, magistrates, and their families. And also those in the towns, they did not use folk costumes. But since there were at least a priest and someone else in the community that did not wear folk costumes, and because they were traveling more and more often, the people wearing folk costumes, they knew that people elsewhere dressed differently. So it was not like they just got in this kind of glass bowl and stayed there. It became a kind of identity. When they traveled, people knew where they belonged. But in the middle of the 1800s, around 1850, the folk costume era ended. As you see here, this is also from the same area as I'm wearing my costume. As you see over here, the men had stopped using folk costumes, but the women were still using them. And here you see the elder women are still using it, but the younger ones have stopped using them. But in the same time, in the middle of the 1850s, well, first I have to say, if you don't know, in 1814 something important happened in Norway. In the end of the Napoleon War, we saw the chance to get our independence, but we didn't manage, so it was kind of given away or taken or whatever from the Danish to the Swedish. So it was in union with Sweden, and we didn't like it. But since we had this opportunity, we tried to get our independence in 1814. It was a growing thinking of how to build an independent Norway. So when the National Romantic era came in Europe, it had big influence in the Norwegian arts. This is a very important picture. It's called Brudeferden I Hardanger, the wedding travel. It is several pictures from the same theme and the same artist, and it was also made a poem about it and music, and it was showed on a theater, and it was, I mean, peak national romantic in Norway. This was Norway. But it wasn't only Norway. I mean, this kind of artistic approach to the folk culture was all over Europe. We started to collect folk music, folk dance, folk stories, and also knowledge about the folk costumes. But in Norway, this kind of approach met a ground idea about the independent Norway. And a lot of people started to use costumes in different ways. This is, at that time, a British princess visiting the west coast of Norway, getting dressed up by the locals, and she later became the Norwegian queen. The tourist industry, they started to use in costume, and the tourists, they were not regular tourists. It was the emperor of Germany and so on, British princesses. And they wanted to see the local culture. So they dressed up themselves and dressed up the visitors, the tourists. The other picture here, the woman in ski, that is Eva Nansen, the wife of Fridtjof Nansen, the polar hero. And she was not alone to start using kind of folk costumes for outdoor activities, because the fashion clothes was very unpractical to go hiking in a mountain or go skiing. So they started to use the traditional way of clothing just to be more practical and be able to do more things. But first of all, the tradition with starting to using bunad, it was a kind of counterculture movement in Norway. This lady, she is called Hulda Garborg. She was in Iceland to get inspiration on how to build the Norwegian culture. The thought was that in all the years with Danish and Swedish kings, we had the farmers, the local villages, they had managed to preserve the originally Norwegian culture that belonged from the time we were together with Iceland and Faroe Island. Yeah. So she wanted to take it back, and they wanted to build the new Norway, not on the elite culture coming from Europe, but from this old Norwegian culture. In the language, they wanted all people to get educated and to take part in the community. You should not follow the elite, but you should voice your own opinion and use your own clothes. Not everyone was that happy about this idea. This is a picture from 1913, and it's a funny story today, but it's real. In 1913, Hulda Garborg, the lady I just showed a picture of, she decided to put on stage a theater called Jeppe på Bjerget, written by Holberg. I don't know if you know it. It's a Norwegian piece from the 1600s, and it was translated into the new Norwegian language built on the dialects. But when the theater should start, there come a group of young men that wanted the more Danish language to be the Norwegian language, and they started to making a lot of noise, so they have to stop the theater, and it ended with a fist fight. After the first night, the young men wanting nynorsk, the new Norwegian, to be the Norwegian language, they collected a lot of supporters, and the Danish language supporters, they become even more people, and it was a new fight the next day. For a whole week, people fought in the streets outside the theater. And actually, it said it was at most 20,000 people fighting. And at that time, 25,000 people lived in Oslo. Well, it is funny today, but this tells us how harsh this fight, this cultural kind of war actually was. What was Norway? What should Norway be after the period of being Danish and Swedish? Should we be the old Norwegian traditional farmer-built society, or should we go abroad and look at how they use it or do it elsewhere in Europe and be powered by the elite? But all that discussion ended by the Second World War. This is not a funny picture. It's Heinrich Himmler visiting Norway, and he is visited by two Norwegian women using folk costume, no, three actually they are, and greeting him with Heil Hitler. But the Norwegians, they did not like the Nazis to take all the symbol value in the Norwegian culture. So they stood up against it, and with combined effort from the Allies and the Russians, in May 1944, Norway was freed again. And this is a picture from the 17th of May in 1945. And never before had that many worn national costume on the 17th of May, and it is in front of the castle in Oslo. And from that time, the bunad started to be not a counterculture fight for anything. It was a common symbol of the unity of the Norwegian people, and it symbolized freedom, unity, and democracy. It had started earlier, but this was the end of the fight, and we were all agreeing about this is what the costume is. And the use of the costume exploded. So a lot of people thought we have to do something about it. People can't just make up their own costume and do whatever they want. So these are three strong women, Clara Sem, Ågot Noss, and Magne Karlberg, and they have all contributed great value to the working with the folk costume or the bunads in Norway. But in 1947, just 2 years after the war, it was the official council for bunads in Norway was founded. And that was, in a way, a big mistake. Not the council itself, but it was decided that they should decide and give approval about which bunad is correct and which is not correct. And that was the beginning of a long discussion in Norway about what is the correct bunad and what is the correct way of using bunad. And even though the practice with approving bunads only lasted for a short time, from that time we have managed to grow something called the bunad police, which is actually people going around and telling whoever they meet on the street that you are using it wrong. You shouldn't do that. It should be different. Yeah. And I don't think that's a good thing. But it is important to work on how to protect and to spread knowledge about the folk costumes. But today we have, or actually they say we have 5 different groups of bunads, but I'm going to simplify it and say we have 2 different. This is the ones that are historically correct. They are as close to a copy of the folk costumes as possible. This one here nearest me, she is from Setesdal, which is a valley in the southern Norway. And actually this costume was still in daily use by some people until the 1970s, 80s or something. Yeah. It is one of the most typical costumes that we have. And some of the, even if it was used for so long, it's also a lot of medieval influence in the costumes, actually. On the other side, there are 3 women from the northwest coast, and it has more influence from the Renaissance time. But this is the historical correct, and they have been researched a lot to do them as historical correct as possible. But still, most of the bunads look like this. This is from the northern part of Norway, and this is from Gudbrandsdalen, which is the same area as this one is from. And we have someone here too. Yes, you are from Møre og Romsdal. Yes, that's the west coast. Yeah, and you are also from the west coast, Sunnmøre? Yes. Yes. One from Gudbrandsdalen up here? Yes. They are very similar because that is the typical bunad. The bunad should have white shirt, woolen embroidery on woolen fabric, and usually you should have something on your head. And the men should have a black jacket, some collars on the vest, and short or long trousers. That is the bunad. And in some areas, like yours, yes, both your areas have a lot of tradition from this type of clothing. So even if it's not completely historical correct, it's a lot of historical parts in the costume. But some areas, they didn't have any folk costume, but they wanted a bunad. So they took this as an approach and made new embroideries, new way of thinking. They could find something, a painting on a cupboard or something, and put it into embroidery and make their own bunads. Because everyone, every place in Norway should have a bunad. If not, this United that we made in 1945, it wouldn't be true, because there were some places in Norway that hadn't got a bunad. So now everyone has got a bunad. And that is not a new tradition. I mean, it was made, the beginning was in the end of the 1800s. So it's a long tradition. But in the beginning of May every year the newspaper started to write their articles about what is correct and what is not correct. And there is no good answer. I mean, of course, we know which of those that are historically correct. But if you are going in the streets the whole 17th of May, selling hot dogs and looking after kids, making games for them, you need good footwear. But even though, I mean, in a way, this shouldn't be a problem. The picture with the girl with sneakers on, it was taken for an article that I wrote in the newspaper. And the same year, and I said, of course, you could use sneakers to your bunad if that is important for you, if that is necessary. Use the bunad, that is the point. The same year, I was running for mayor in my hometown. And my opponent said, no, we can't have a mayor like that, which is not regarding our cultural heritage. I didn't become a mayor. I don't think that was the reason. But it says something about how important it is. I mean, this is something that is, this is our history. And I'm not from this area where my bunad belong today. I have lived there for 25 years. I don't speak the dialect, my kids do. But usually I should have a hairpiece like a white scarf, and it's stiff, it looks like this, and when you wear it, it's impossible to hear anyone else. It's noise cancelling. But I don't feel I can wear it, because it's still people remembering their parents using this, not for every day, but for special occasion, going to church and so on. And it was a kind of status. And I mean, I can't just go and take that. I feel comfortable to wearing the clothes, but not the hairpiece, because it's a lot of different symbols connected to it. And I think this discussion, it has recently become two problems for us. The first one is that we stopped making our own clothes. We wanted to buy bunads. It's much easier, but we didn't want to pay for all the handwork. So in the 1990s, a lot of producers of bunad, they started to produce them in Africa, in Asia, and elsewhere in the world. I mean, they make, it's pretty work. I mean, that's not the problem. The problem is that we stop keeping our knowledge about how things are made. We had fewer people wanting to make bunads, knowing how to make bunads, and that is, of course, a big problem. We needed to do something to keep our own tradition. The big discussion about what is allowed and what is not allowed also made two different types of what is called festdrakt. The one on the end there, it costs more, I think 6 times more than it costed me to make this one. It is really, really expensive. It's not a price-worthy alternative to bunad, but you can use whatever color you want. You can make it your own. You don't have to think about a bunad police coming and telling you you are using it wrong or whatever. So it's a kind of freedom in it, but it's no tradition. It's a fashion piece. But because it costs so much, it's another movement that said we have to make it affordable for everyone. So this group of people, and I mean, I like that a bit more. They started to use old fabrics to make their own clothes, but this is also nothing to do with folk costume or bunad or tradition. It's just, as you can see, they keep the idea of what a bunad should look like, but they are not a bunad, it's not tradition. And since it's not, since it's just a fashion piece, it's difficult to give it to your children, to your grandchildren. I have a bunad from my great-great-grandmother, and I can't use it anymore. But my daughters can. But as a fashion piece, it's nothing, it hasn't got that symbolic value that will last for years. But this is, even though they take a huge amount of space in the social media and in the newspapers, this is still the bunad tradition in Norway. Happy people in the 17th of May, still in the middle of the day, still not drunk. And they are making themselves ready for go dancing, I think. And this is how most people use the bunads. We use it for the 17th of May. We use it for weddings. And now it has been very common that the bride is in white dress and the groom in bunad. And this is also the bunad tradition. And this is something of the greatness of the bunad. Because if you are going to, or if you are royal, or very few of us is that, or if you are going to the royals on a visit, you can always wear a bunad and you are correctly dressed, always. So it's a kind of democratic costume to wear. But these problems that we are losing the knowledge, people stopped producing, stopped making costumes ourselves, and the fact that people are a bit tired of the strict rules for using bunads and started to make all the different kinds of variations, made the 4 organizations working for bunads come together. And I was asked when they began, I think they began full-time 5 years ago, but actually it started about 20 years ago because they had been working quite differently with the bunads. So they have to kind of work themselves together to see that we have some problems in common and we have to solve them. And the solution was to apply for the UNESCO status. But what is the UNESCO status? It is not the costume itself. It's not how it looks. It's not the history. It is the knowledge and the way we are using the costumes. Because it's not material cultural heritage, it's immaterial. It's something that is living tradition. It's something that changes all the time and something you have to keep doing to keep alive. So we have to go on making bunads in Norway, teaching young people to make bunads. And this year I made this report called Bunad Now. And I asked the producers if they are now producing more of the bunads in Norway, and yes, they are. They have worked hard for several years, and they have managed both to take the knowledge back and started producing, and we have educated a lot of more people to make the bunads, but also we have managed to educate a lot of the customers to buy bunad that they know about the process of making it, and they know why it costs a lot to buy it. And a lot of them are offered to make the whole or some parts of the bunads themselves, and more people are making, if not the whole bunad, part of the bunad themselves. But there is one difference from the men and the girls. Because the girls, they get their bunads very often when they are 15 years old, and the family goes together, the grandparents and the parents, and they buy this bunad, and they can collect silver for several years before that, and then they are fully dressed when they are 15 and standing for the priest. But the boys, they are not fully grown when they are 15, so they don't get costume. So a lot of the men, because folk costume is more and more popular amongst men also, they have to buy their own bunad. And then it's much more a question about money. And very often they are, I'm going to a wedding and everyone else is wearing a bunad. I need it next month, actually. So they have to go into a shop, ask, do you have a bunad for me? I'm not going to get fully dressed up like I'm going to a costume party. I just want to blend in. They are bunads looking quite similar to a suit, and they are manufactured abroad, and you can buy it in a store just like that. And it's cheaper than other bunads. So a lot of young men buy their bunads, and they are still produced outside Norway. But that also the knowledge of the less knowledge, the less typical handcraft, because it's so much similar to a suit. That's a kind of comfort. But with this UNESCO status, the organizations are going on working for preserving the knowledge of the traditional handcraft. But that also means we have to permitting imperfection. And I think that is important. I have to use pictures of my own kids because I wouldn't make laughter of someone else's or someone else. So they are my kids. If you are not allowing people to try for the first time, how would they learn? They are now 18 and 15, so this is some years ago. And it was a few weeks before the 17th of May, and I said, I have no time to make you new costumes. And they had outgrown the old ones. And they said, okay, then we make it ourselves. Of course, it was a bit more time-consuming to help them. But I couldn't refuse. I mean, if someone wants to learn, if someone wants to try, if someone wants to feel pretty, and I think this is, I showed you the first picture of me, I think this is the prettiest they have ever felt in a bunad because they have made it themselves. And they are not correct. It's not perfection. But it is the joy about wearing bunad and being able to wear it the way you want it and with pride that is so, so important to keep also. But then you have to permit imperfection. Thank you.
Einhverjar spurningar til hennar Mette? Einhverjar spurningar? Ég verð að segja að ég fyrir mínum parti finnst mjög skemmtilegt að heyra að þjóðbúningalöggan, hún fyrirfinnst í öðrum löndum líka. Við kannast vel við þessa umræðu hérna heima, I'm talking about the Bunas police in Iceland that we have here as well. Við kannast mjög vel við þessa umræðu hérna heima. Það sem að mér þykir mikilvægt að taka fram í þessu samhengi, við sjáum oft sérstaklega á Facebook, á netinu, þar sem að fólk getur skipst á skoðunum nokkuð frjálslega, að það er sem kannski tvennt sem að við þurfum alltaf að hafa í huga, að það að íslenski búningurinn, rétt eins og svo norski, hefur náttúrulega auðvitað orðið fyrir áhrifum af tísku síðustu áratuga og hugmyndin er alltaf hvernig við nálgumst búninginn, hvernig er rétt að klæðast íslenska búningnum. Það nálgast ég það alltaf með þeirri hugsun að ég vil að langamma, amma, formæður mínar væru ánægðar með mig eins og ég kæmi til dyranna klædd í íslenskum búning. Og það þýðir þá líka að leyfa flottu upphlutsettunum sem að voru í allavegana litum, í allavegana efnum, alls konar munstur, leyfa því að njóta sig líka og við erum að sjá núna aftur á ungar konur eru hvernig að nota upphlutsettin aftur. But yes, hearing about the Bunas police. And just the joy that we are seeing here in Iceland, seeing more people wanting to make their costume. Yeah. And the young men as well. We have a huge group of young men that will be making their own costumes. This winter, actually, is one among them. So we are really excited to see how many young people are embracing this cultural heritage. Og þetta með það sem að svo mikilvægt að við höfum í huga að til þess að vernda þennan þjóðararf sem að býr í textílum og í þjóðbúningunum, að það þarf náttúrulega að viðhalda hefðinni, viðhalda aðalega þarna úti eða pólitíkusar þá vantar alltaf meir pening í rannsóknir og útgáfa á efni tengdum þjóðbúningunum og texti yfir höfuð. En einmitt að bara nálgast búninginn af virðingu, ekki bara búninginn sjálfan heldur líka þann sem að skarta búningnum, að við getum sagt mikið ekki fallegur búning, mikið ekki fallegur uppbytt sett sem að þú ert í. En ef það eru engar spurningar, að þá ætlum við að hafa hópið. Já, spurning. Yes.
Hi, thank you so much for this talk. I really enjoyed it. You mentioned actually 5 types of costumes, but you focus on 2. And I wanted to know also about, is there a regional difference? Or like, according to where you are in Norway, there's maybe one pattern that's more typical of that region, or not really?
No.
Sometimes they will hear about, but I wanted to ask you.
Yeah, the 5 types. It's the one that was still in use. Like this one, it was still in use in the 1970s. And it was still in use when they had already begun to use it as bunad. So that's type 1. And they could be quite old-fashioned, and they could be quite modern. They started to use this one in the 1830s or so on. Yeah. That was the first one. The second one is a well-known tradition. It has been stopped use, but it was just out of use when they started to use it as bunad. And then it's the third one, which is you have some samples, but you have to do a kind of research to find out how it was used. Maybe you are missing the shirt, and then you have to make a kind of, well, not a free guess, but what could have been worn. And the second one is like yours. It is some historical costumes that are similar in a way, but it has changed to be more practical and be more bunad accurate. Yeah, and it's but it has some historical forbilde. Yeah, and the fifth is you have very little historical knowledge about the costume. I mean, so like painting on a cupboard or something, and you put it into a bunad, but it has been used as a bunad for 100 years. Yeah. Mm. Yeah.